A bear was blocking the road, crying non-stop. Drivers were left confused, but the police uncovered something astonishing. The reason behind this scene moved everyone. The morning sun cast long shadows across Yellowstone National Park's winding roads, painting the landscape in hues of amber and gold. Officer Rachel Morgan adjusted her ranger hat, squinting at the unusual traffic build-up ahead. After 5 years of patrolling these roads, she could tell when something was off, and today her instincts were screaming. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching us from. Stay tuned. Ethan, we've got a situation at Junction 27, she spoke into her radio, her voice carrying a note of concern. Officer Ethan Carter's response came quickly, his familiar drawl tinged with curiosity. On my way, Rachel. What are we looking at? Rachel pulled her patrol vehicle to the side of the road, observing the growing line of cars. Tourists hung out of their windows, phones raised, all focusing on something she couldn't quite see from her position. Not sure yet, but we've got about 20 vehicles stopped, and more are joining the queue. As she stepped out of her vehicle, the crisp mountain air filled her lungs. The sound of excited chatter mixed with the occasional car horn, creating a cacophony that seemed out of place in the usually peaceful park. Rachel made her way through the crowd, her uniform parting the sea of tourists like Moses with the Red Sea. What she saw next made her heart skip a beat. In the middle of the road lay a small bear cub, its tiny frame trembling with each labored breath. One of its paws was clearly injured, and the animal's eyes held a strange, almost trusting look that set off alarm bells in Rachel's mind. Wild animals, especially bears, shouldn't appear this comfortable around humans. Ethan arrived moments later, his tall frame casting a shadow over the scene. The partners exchanged knowing looks. Something wasn't right here. Years of working together had taught them to read each other's subtle cues, and right now, both were picking up on the same unsettling signals. Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your vehicles, Ethan announced, his voice carrying authority without aggression. This is a potentially dangerous situation. Most tourists complied, though some continued filming from a distance. Rachel noticed something that made her stomach turn, a paper bag near the cub, its contents spilled across the asphalt. Fast food wrappers and half-eaten sandwiches created a trail leading to the injured animal. This wasn't a random occurrence. Someone had deliberately lured this cub here. Ethan, she whispered, gesturing toward the forest edge. Large paw prints marked the soil, fresh and deep. Mama Bear's been here recently. The situation was becoming more complex by the minute. If the mother was nearby, watching her injured cub surrounded by humans, things could turn dangerous very quickly. The cub let out a pitiful whimper that seemed to echo across the valley. Rachel's training told her to maintain professional distance, but something about this situation pulled at her heartstrings. In her peripheral vision, she caught movement in the tree line, something large shifting in the shadows. "We need wildlife services here now," Ethan said, already reaching for his radio. But before he could make the call, the cub struggled to its feet, swaying unsteadily. Despite its injury, it began limping toward the forest, leaving a trail of small, uneven footprints. Rachel and Ethan followed at a safe distance, their boots crunching on fallen leaves. The forest seemed to hold its breath as they ventured deeper, away from the commotion of the road. The temperature dropped several degrees under the dense canopy, and the sounds of tourist chatter faded into an eerie silence. What they discovered next would change everything. Hidden in a small clearing, obscured by thick undergrowth, lay evidence of human activity that had no business being in a national park. Camping equipment was scattered about, but not the kind used by regular tourists. This was something else entirely, something that made Rachel's law enforcement instincts tingle with anticipation. The cub had led them straight to it, like a breadcrumb trail in a dark fairy tale. But unlike fairy tales, this story was far from over. As Rachel and Ethan exchanged glances, they knew they had stumbled upon something bigger than a simple case of an injured wildlife. This was just the beginning of a mystery that would test their skills, their friendship, and their dedication to protecting the natural treasures of Yellowstone. In the distance, a deep growl rumbled through the trees, reminding them that in this forest they were not alone. The real question was, Who else was out there, watching and waiting? The clearing told a story that made Rachel's blood run cold. Professional-grade equipment lay carefully arranged under camouflage tarps, too sophisticated for ordinary campers. What caught her eye wasn't just the expensive gear, it was the purposeful layout, the strategic positioning that spoke of detailed planning and regular use. "Ethan, look at this," Rachel called out, kneeling beside what appeared to be a monitoring station. Multiple screens displayed various locations throughout the park, their blue glow creating an otherworldly atmosphere in the shadowy clearing. They've been tracking movement patterns. The injured cub had curled up beneath a fallen log, whimpering softly. Its presence here couldn't be coincidence, not with the sophisticated setup surrounding them. Ethan approached the cub carefully, his experienced eyes scanning for signs of what might have caused its injury. "Rachel, you need to see this," he said, his voice tight with concern. Attached to the cub's injured paw was a small metallic device, barely visible beneath its fur. "This isn't a natural injury. Someone's been using this little guy." A sudden rustle in the undergrowth made them both freeze. Through the dense foliage, they caught glimpses of movement, two figures retreating rapidly into the deeper forest. Rachel's instinct was to pursue, but the cub's condition and the evidence surrounding them demanded immediate attention. "We can't leave this scene unprotected," she decided, already reaching for her radio to call for backup. "Whatever's going on here, it's bigger than catching those two." Ethan nodded, his attention divided between securing the scene and monitoring the increasingly distressed cub. "I'll start documenting everything. We need to get wildlife services here fast. This little one needs medical attention." As they waited for backup, Rachel began piecing together the puzzle before them. The monitors showed strategic points throughout the park, popular animal gathering spots, watering holes, and known migration routes. But it was a stack of papers partially hidden under a tarp that made her gut twist with understanding. "Yellow Adventures Tours," she read aloud, examining the company letterhead. "Isn't that the new outfit that started operating last season? The one offering extreme wilderness experiences?" Ethan's expression darkened. "Yeah, seemed too good to be true. Their permit application went through unusually fast. Some of the senior rangers were surprised it was approved at all." The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted their conversation. Within minutes, the clearing was filled with activity as wildlife services and additional rangers arrived. The cub was carefully sedated and prepared for transport to the sanctuary, but Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they were only scratching the surface of something much larger. Dr. Sarah Chen, the park's leading wildlife veterinarian, knelt beside the sedated cub. "This is sophisticated technology," she said, examining the device on its paw. "Not something your average poacher would have access to. And look at these marks. They're using these animals systematically." Rachel felt her chest tighten. In her 15 years of service, she'd seen all kinds of violations, but this was different. This was calculated, organized, and worst of all, it suggested involvement from people who should have been protecting the park. "We need to handle this carefully," Ethan advised, pulling Rachel aside. "If what we're thinking is true, we don't know who we can trust." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, the team worked to collect and document everything in the clearing. Rachel noticed something else, small packets of food laced with an unknown substance. "Doctor." Chen quickly bagged them for analysis, her expression grave. "They're not just tracking these animals," she explained. "They're conditioning them, making them less afraid of human contact. The implications..." A low growl from the darkening forest reminded them that they weren't alone. The mother bear was still out there somewhere, possibly watching them work. But Rachel's mind was racing with bigger concerns. Who were the two figures they'd seen fleeing? How deep did this operation go? And most importantly, who within the park's administration might be involved? As the last of the evidence was carefully packed away and the injured cub was safely secured for transport, Rachel and Ethan shared a knowing look. This wasn't just about protecting wildlife anymore. This was about exposing a corruption that threatened the very essence of what they'd sworn to protect. Back at the ranger station, Rachel began creating a secure file, documenting everything they'd found. Her computer screen illuminated her determined face as she typed, "Operation Shadow Guide, Day 1. She knew that from this moment on, nothing in Yellowstone would be quite the same. The ringing of her phone startled her. The caller ID showed unknown, and for a moment she hesitated. In her gut, she knew that answering this call would be like opening Pandora's box, but sometimes that's exactly what justice required. Rachel stared at her phone for 3 rings before answering. "Officer Morgan speaking. The bear cub you found?" "It's not the first." The voice was digitally altered, adding another layer of mystery to an already complex situation. "Check the sanctuary records from the past 6 months. Look for patterns in admissions." Before Rachel could respond, the line went dead. She sat back in her chair, processing this new information. The sanctuary's records were supposed to be confidential. Whoever this caller was, they had inside access. "Everything okay?" Ethan appeared in her doorway, 2 cups of coffee in hand. His expression shifted as he read her face. "What happened?" Rachel quickly filled him in on the mysterious call while pulling up the sanctuary's database. As they scrolled through the records, a disturbing pattern emerged. Over the past 6 months, there had been a significant increase in injured wildlife admissions, particularly young animals with unusual injuries or signs of human contact. "Look at this," Ethan pointed to the screen. 3 wolf pups in March, 2 elk calves in April, and now our bear cub. All found near popular tourist trails, all showing signs of manufactured injuries. At the wildlife sanctuary, Dr. Chen was working late, monitoring their latest patient. The bear cub, now named Buddy by the staff, was responding well to treatment, but blood tests revealed something troubling. "These aren't normal toxicology results," she explained over video call. "Whatever was in that food you found, it's designed to make the animals docile without causing immediate harm." Rachel felt her jaw clench. They're not just tracking these animals, they're engineering encounters. But why? The answer began to take shape the next morning when Rachel received an encrypted email containing promotional materials from Yellow Adventures Tours. What caught her eye wasn't the advertised authentic wilderness experiences, but the fine print. Guaranteed wildlife encounters, exclusive photo opportunities, traditional hunting experiences available upon special request. "They're selling guaranteed encounters," Rachel breathed, the pieces falling into place. "These animals aren't just being tracked, they're being turned into unwitting performers in some sick wildlife circus." Ethan leaned against her desk, his face dark with concern. "And if they're offering traditional hunting experiences, you can bet those aren't just photo shoots." A knock at the door made them both jump. Jenny Martinez, one of the newest rangers, stood in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this. We've got tourists reporting unusual wildlife behavior near Maple Creek. Multiple animals approaching vehicles, seeming to beg for food." Rachel and Ethan exchanged glances. Maple Creek was on the opposite side of the park from where they'd found Buddy. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a systematic operation. At the sanctuary, Buddy was making progress, but Dr. Chen noticed something peculiar. The cub showed signs of previous human contact, not just from recent handling, but possibly months of conditioning. "Whoever's behind this has been playing a long game," she reported. "These animals are being groomed for something bigger." Rachel spent the afternoon mapping out reported wildlife incidents across the park. A pattern emerged, a circular route that corresponded perfectly with Yellow Adventures Tours' advertised Premium Wildlife Experience Trail. As she worked, a maintenance worker named Mike Thompson stopped by her office. "Officer Morgan?" "Found something weird while clearing trails near Osprey Point." He placed a small electronic device on her desk. "There's dozens of these hidden in the trees. They emit some kind of signal. Been messing with my radio all morning." Rachel examined the device. It was similar to the one found on Buddy's paw, but larger. "How long have you been finding these?" "Started noticing them about 6 months ago. Thought they were scientific equipment at first, but..." He hesitated. "They're not logged in any of our official research programs." The sun was setting when Rachel and Ethan drove out to Osprey Point. As they walked the trail, their flashlights revealed more devices hidden in the foliage. Each one was strategically placed along known animal paths. "They're herding them," Ethan realized. "These devices must emit something that affects their behavior, drives them toward or away from certain areas." A rustling in the bushes caught their attention. Rachel's flashlight beam revealed a young elk, wearing a similar device to Buddy's. Instead of running, the animal approached them, eyes glazed and movements unnaturally calm. "This isn't right," Rachel whispered, her heart breaking for these manipulated creatures. "We need to shut this down." Back at her office, Rachel began compiling evidence, but something made her hesitate before filing an official report. If their suspicions about internal corruption were correct, they needed to be careful about who they trusted with this information. A text message lit up her phone. "Not all tours end with photos. Check permit office records. Follow the money." Another anonymous tip, another piece of the puzzle. As night fell over Yellowstone, Rachel stood at her window watching the shadows lengthen across the parking lot. Tomorrow, they would begin tracking the money, following the paper trail that would hopefully lead them to the truth. But for now, somewhere in the darkness, more animals were being manipulated, more tourists were being deceived, and time was running out to stop it. The next morning, Rachel arrived at the permit office before dawn. The early hour meant she could work undisturbed, diving deep into files that might reveal the truth behind Yellow Adventures tours. The office was silent, except for the gentle hum of her computer and the occasional shuffling of papers. "You're here early," a voice startled her. Linda Peterson, the head of permit processing, stood in the doorway. Her perfectly pressed ranger uniform and immaculate appearance seemed out of place at this hour. "Anything I can help you find?" Rachel kept her expression neutral, remembering the anonymous warnings about trust. "Just following up on some routine checks. The increased wildlife activity has us reviewing all recent permits." Linda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. Let me know if you need anything." She lingered a moment too long before leaving, her heels clicking down the hallway. Once alone, Rachel discovered something odd in the permit files. Yellow Adventures Tour's application had been processed in record time, 3 days instead of the usual 3 months. The signatures authorizing the permit included names she didn't recognize, yet they held senior positions within the park's administration. Her phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. "Meeting in 10, bring coffee, big news." In their secure meeting spot, a maintenance shed they'd swept for surveillance devices. Ethan shared his findings. "I've been tracking their vehicle movements through park entrance logs. Every Tuesday and Friday their tours deviate from their registered routes. They go off-grid for exactly 3 hours. Rachel spread out the documents she'd found. "Look at this. Their permit was fast-tracked by Thomas Wellington." "Ever heard of him?" "That's just it," Ethan replied, his voice low. "Wellington doesn't exist. I checked personnel records going back 20 years. The signature's real, but the person isn't." A knock on the shed door made them both freeze. Dr. Chen entered, looking exhausted but excited. "Sorry I'm late. You need to see Buddy's latest test results." She laid out several papers covered in complex medical data. "The substance we found in his system? It's a specialized compound. Extremely expensive, requires permits to manufacture. Only 3 facilities in the country are authorized to produce it." Rachel leaned forward. "And? One of them is owned by a subsidiary of the same company that processes payments for Yellow Adventures tours." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about tourist traps or photo opportunities. This was an organized operation with sophisticated backing. Later that day, Rachel received a call from the sanctuary. Buddy had shown remarkable improvement, but something unusual had happened. During his morning feeding, they discovered a small microchip embedded under his skin, different from standard wildlife tracking devices. "It's military grade," Dr. Chen explained when they met at the sanctuary, "used for long-range tracking and biological monitoring. The crazy part, it's transmitting data somewhere, but we can't trace the signal. It's using encrypted frequencies." As they talked, Rachel noticed Jenny Martinez watching them intently from across the sanctuary. When their eyes met, Jenny quickly looked away, busying herself with paperwork. Something about her behavior set off alarm bells. Ethan spent the afternoon following up on the vehicle logs. He discovered that Yellow Adventures Tours vehicles always returned from their off-grid excursions with less fuel than a normal route would consume. They were going somewhere specific during those missing hours. Rachel's computer pinged with an alert. Someone was accessing the investigation files from Linda Peterson's terminal. But according to the front gate log, Linda had left the park an hour ago. "We need to move faster." Rachel told Ethan during their evening debrief. "They know we're looking into them. Did you see how Jenny was watching us today?" "Yeah, but here's the thing, I checked her background. She's not just a new ranger. She used to work for an environmental protection agency, specialized in undercover operations." This revelation added another layer to their already complex investigation. Was Jenny a potential ally or another player in this elaborate scheme? Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent call from Dr. Chen. The encrypted signal from Buddy's chip? It just went active. Whatever it's transmitting, it's happening now. Rachel and Ethan raced to the sanctuary, arriving just as the sun began to set. The normally peaceful facility was alive with unusual activity. Multiple animals were showing signs of agitation, and their monitoring devices were all activating simultaneously. "It's like they're being called," Dr. Chen observed, watching the disturbed animals. But called to what? As if in answer, they heard the distant sound of tourist vans moving through the darkening park. Yellow Adventures Tours was starting their evening special expedition, and now they knew the animals were being systematically gathered for something much more sinister than photo opportunities. Rachel checked her watch. They had 3 hours before those vans returned. 3 hours to find out where they were going and what they were really doing with these manipulated animals. But as they prepared to follow the signal, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. In the growing darkness, shadows seemed to move with purpose, and the line between protector and threat was becoming increasingly blurred. The real question wasn't just what they would find, but who they would find waiting for them. Through the deepening twilight, Rachel and Ethan followed the signal emanating from Buddy's chip, their vehicle's headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. The sanctuary's tracking equipment had given them a general direction, but the encrypted nature of the transmission made precise location impossible. 2 of Yellow Adventure's vans just passed the north gate. Jenny's voice crackled over their secure radio channel. After a tense discussion, they decided to trust her. Her background in environmental protection operations could prove invaluable. They're heading toward Maple Ridge. That's nowhere near their approved routes. Rachel gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Can you follow them?" "Negative. They'd spot a ranger vehicle too easily. But I've got eyes on the ridge." The signal led them deeper into the park's restricted areas, away from tourist trails and marked paths. Their SUV struggled over the rough terrain until even four-wheel drive couldn't take them further. "We'll have to continue on foot," Ethan said, grabbing their gear. As they hiked through the undergrowth, Dr. Chen's voice came through their earpieces. "The signal's getting stronger. Whatever's controlling these animals, it's definitely in your vicinity." The forest around them seemed alive with unusual activity. They spotted several animals moving with unnatural purpose, all heading in the same direction. A young elk with a familiar metallic device on its leg passed within feet of them, showing no fear. "Look," Ethan whispered, pointing to a faint glow through the trees. They crept closer, staying low and quiet. What they found made them both freeze. In a hidden valley, carefully concealed from aerial observation, sat a sophisticated operations center. Modern equipment hummed quietly, sending out signals that were drawing wildlife from miles around. But it was the wall of monitors that caught Rachel's attention. Dozens of screens showing various locations throughout the park, many featuring wealthy-looking tourists in hunting gear. "They're selling guaranteed hunting experiences," Rachel breathed, the full picture finally becoming clear. "The animals are being conditioned to approach humans, then led here for private hunting parties." A sudden noise made them duck behind some equipment. 2 figures emerged from a nearby building, engaged in intense conversation. Rachel's heart nearly stopped. She recognized one of them as Linda Peterson from the permit office. "The rangers are getting too close," Linda was saying. "If Morgan and Carter track the signals—" "They won't," the other figure interrupted. "The new scrambling equipment arrives tomorrow. By next week, we'll have everything moved to the secondary location." Rachel carefully recorded the conversation on her phone, her hand steady despite her racing heart. This was the evidence they needed, proof of internal cooperation with illegal activities. The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted the conversation. Through the trees, they could see the distinctive outline of Yellow Adventures vans approaching. Linda and her companion hurried toward them, leaving Rachel and Ethan hidden behind the equipment. "Rachel," Jenny's voice whispered through their earpieces. "You've got company coming from the north. 3 more vehicles not marked as yellow adventures." Before they could retreat, the area burst into activity. Wealthy-looking clients emerged from the vans, carrying expensive equipment that definitely wasn't for photography. Rachel's stomach turned as she realized these people had paid thousands for a guaranteed successful hunt, taking advantage of animals that had been deliberately conditioned to trust humans. Ethan gestured urgently. They needed to move. But as they began their careful retreat, Rachel stumbled over something that made her blood run cold. A collection of tracking devices identical to the one found on Buddy, ready to be attached to more unsuspecting animals. They were nearly clear when a voice rang out. "Check the perimeter. Make sure we're secure before the guests arrive." Rachel and Ethan pressed themselves against the ground as flashlight beams swept the area. They could hear footsteps approaching their position, accompanied by the sound of 2-way radios crackling with activity. Through their earpieces, Jenny's urgent whisper, "Multiple vehicles approaching from the main road. Looks like a larger group than usual." They were running out of time and options. The operation was clearly preparing to move locations, taking their evidence with them. But with armed security patrolling the perimeter and more visitors arriving, their chance of slipping away unnoticed was diminishing by the second. Rachel's phone vibrated silently. A message from Dr. Chen. "The signal's affecting more animals. Whatever they're planning tonight, it's bigger than usual." As they lay there in the darkness, Rachel realized they had minutes to make a crucial decision: retreat with the evidence they'd already gathered, or stay and risk exposure to uncover the full scope of the operation. Either way, the next few moments would change everything. The approaching footsteps grew closer, and somewhere in the darkness they could hear the unnatural movement of wildlife being drawn toward the hidden valley. Time was running out, and the night's true test was about to begin. Rachel's heart pounded as the footsteps drew closer. Making a split-second decision, she pulled Ethan toward a pile of empty equipment crates. They squeezed inside just as a beam of light swept past their previous hiding spot. "Area 4, clear," a gruff voice reported into a radio. "Moving to Sector 5. Once the footsteps faded, Ethan whispered, "We need a distraction to get out of here." Before Rachel could respond, their earpieces crackled with Jenny's voice. "I've got an idea. Give me 2 minutes." Through gaps in the crate, they watched as more guests arrived, their expensive vehicles adding to the collection already parked in the hidden valley. Linda Peterson was greeting them personally, handling paperwork and what looked like liability waivers. "The special serum has been administered," one of the staff members reported to Linda. "The animals will begin gathering within 30 minutes. Rachel's hand tightened around her phone, still recording. The evidence was mounting, but they needed more, something concrete that couldn't be explained away or buried by corrupt officials. Suddenly, multiple alarms began blaring from the facility's main building. Security personnel rushed toward the source of the commotion, creating the diversion they needed. "Fire alarm triggered in 3 locations," Jenny's satisfied voice came through their earpieces. "I also may have accidentally triggered their emergency sprinkler system." As chaos erupted around them, Rachel and Ethan seized their chance to move. They crept between vehicles, gathering more evidence, photographs of license plates, snippets of conversation, documents left carelessly on car seats. "The tracking system's malfunctioning," someone shouted from the main building. "We're losing signals from sectors 2 through 7. Through the confusion, Rachel spotted something that made her pause, a laptop left open on a portable desk, displays showing detailed maps and schedules. "Cover me," she whispered to Ethan. While security was distracted by the multiple alarms, Rachel quickly connected a small device to the laptop, a program that would copy its hard drive remotely to their secure server. Dr. Chen had provided the technology, originally designed for tracking wildlife migration patterns. "What do you mean the animals are dispersing?" Linda's voice cut through the chaos. "Get them back, our guests paid for guaranteed encounters." The sound of approaching footsteps forced Rachel and Ethan to separate, each diving behind different vehicles. Through her earpiece, she heard Ethan's controlled breathing, a sign he was staying calm despite the increasing danger. "Rachel," Dr. Chen's voice came through. "Something's happening with the animals at the sanctuary. The signals are changing frequency." Whatever they're doing out there is affecting all the tagged wildlife in the park. From her hiding spot, Rachel could see the main control panel through a window. The screens showed dozens of blinking dots, tagged animals, all moving erratically, breaking from their programmed patterns. Jenny's voice returned, urgent now. Park rangers are responding to reports of unusual wildlife activity across all sectors. This is getting too big to contain. A sudden commotion near the main building drew everyone's attention. Several of the wealthy guests were demanding refunds, their exclusive hunting experience ruined by the malfunctioning systems and absent wildlife. "This is our chance," Ethan whispered through the radio. "Most of the security is tied up with the guests." Rachel was about to agree when she noticed something on one of the screens, footage of their own ranger vehicle, parked where they'd left it earlier. Two figures were approaching it with suspicious intent. "They're going to find our car," she breathed, "if they search it." "I've got that covered," Jenny responded. "Disabled the GPS and wiped the onboard computer remotely. Standard procedure in undercover ops." The chaos around them was growing. More guests were leaving, demanding explanations and refunds. Security personnel were scrambling to maintain order while simultaneously trying to fix the malfunctioning systems. Through it all, Rachel noticed Linda Peterson making a phone call, her face pale with worry. "Sir, we have a situation." "No, we can't confirm a breach, but..." "Yes, sir, I understand. We'll begin Protocol Zero immediately." Those words sent a chill down Rachel's spine. Whatever Protocol Zero was, it couldn't be good. They needed to get this evidence to safety, but they also needed to know what was coming next. As if reading her thoughts, Ethan's voice came through. "Rachel, we've got what we need. Any more time here is pushing our luck." But Rachel's instincts were screaming that they were on the verge of uncovering something even bigger. The laptop was still copying files, and Linda's phone call suggested they were about to destroy evidence. The night air was thick with tension as alarms continued to blare and security personnel rushed about. In the distance, they could hear the sound of more vehicles approaching. But were they leaving or arriving? And what exactly was Protocol Zero? Time was running out to make a decision, and this time there would be no middle ground. Stay and risk everything for the complete truth, or retreat with what they had and live to fight another day. The next few moments would determine not just the fate of their investigation, but potentially the future of Yellowstone itself. In the chaos of alarms and flashing lights, Rachel made her decision. "Jenny, can you access their communication channels?" "Already on it," Jenny replied. "They're switching to encrypted frequencies, but I'm picking up fragments. Whatever Protocol Zero is, it's happening in phases." Rachel watched as Linda Peterson urgently directed staff members to different areas of the compound. The laptop was still copying files, 78% complete according to the small device she'd attached. "Multiple vehicles approaching from the east," Ethan warned through the radio, "different from the hunting parties. These look military-grade." Through the window, Rachel could see staff members rapidly destroying documents and wiping hard drives. Whatever evidence they hadn't gathered yet would soon be gone forever. "Dr. Chen," Rachel whispered into her radio, "are you still monitoring the animal signals?" "Yes, and something's changed. The frequencies are shifting. It's like they're preparing to switch to a completely different control system." A sudden explosion of activity near the main building caught everyone's attention. The first of the military-style vehicles had arrived, and from them emerged figures in professional tactical gear. These weren't park rangers or local law enforcement. Their movements were too precise, too coordinated. "They're not just destroying evidence," Ethan observed. "They're extracting everything. This is a complete shutdown." Rachel's device blinked. File transfer complete. But as she moved to retrieve it, she noticed something on the laptop's screen that made her pause. A map had appeared, showing multiple locations throughout different national parks across the country. Yellowstone wasn't the only target. "Rachel," Jenny's urgent voice came through, "you need to see this." "I'm sending surveillance footage from the park's western entrance. More of those military vehicles are arriving, and they're carrying specialized equipment. Whatever Protocol Zero is, it's not just about cleaning house." Linda's voice carried across the compound. "Begin Phase 2. All units to designated positions." The tactical teams moved with practiced efficiency, setting up perimeters and beginning to dismantle the operation's infrastructure. But they weren't just taking things apart. They were replacing equipment with new devices, even more sophisticated than what they were removing. "The animal signals, Doctor," Chen reported, her voice tense. "They're not shutting them down, they're upgrading them. The new frequency is far more powerful." Rachel and Ethan watched from their hiding spots as the transformation unfolded. This wasn't an ending, it was an evolution. The operation wasn't being closed, it was being elevated to something far more complex. "We can't let them complete this upgrade," Rachel whispered to Ethan. "Once these new systems are in place, already ahead of you," Jenny interrupted. "I've got park emergency protocols ready to trigger. One word from you and I can shut down power to this entire sector." But before they could act, Linda's voice rang out again. "Intruder alert! Security breach in Sector 7. Rachel's blood ran cold. Sector 7 was exactly where they were hiding. "Multiple heat signatures detected," one of the tactical team members reported. "Conducting sweep now." Time was up. They had the evidence they needed, but getting out alive had just become significantly more complicated. The compound was now crawling with professional security forces, and the hunting party's vehicles blocked most escape routes. Through their earpieces came Dr. Chen's worried voice. "The new signals. They're affecting the animals differently. Even Buddy is responding, and he's supposed to be sedated. Whatever they're planning, it's not just about hunting anymore." In the midst of this revelation, Rachel noticed something else. The tactical teams were setting up what looked like a perimeter, but not to keep people out. The positioning suggested they were preparing to contain something within the area. "Jenny," Rachel whispered, "those emergency protocols, how soon can you trigger them?" "On your mark." "But Rachel, once I do this, there's no going back. We'll have minutes at most before they trace the source." Ethan's voice joined the conversation. "Whatever we're going to do, it needs to be now. Those teams are closing in, and they're carrying some serious hardware." The compound had become a maze of moving lights and shadows, with tactical teams methodically sweeping each sector. Rachel could hear them getting closer, their boots crunching on the gravel just yards away. In her mind, she could see all the pieces coming together, the animals, the signals, the military-grade equipment, and now this mysterious Protocol Zero. This wasn't just about illegal hunting anymore. They were witnessing the birth of something far more sinister, and they might be the only ones who could stop it. But first, they had to survive the next few minutes. "Now, Jenny," Rachel commanded. In an instant, the entire compound plunged into darkness as the emergency protocols activated. The sudden blackout triggered a cascade of confused shouts and urgent radio chatter. In the chaos that followed, backup generators hummed to life, but their emergency lighting only created more shadows to hide in. Rachel and Ethan used the confusion to their advantage, moving swiftly between vehicles and equipment. "The new frequency transmitters are offline," Dr. Chen reported through their earpieces. "But Rachel, you need to hear this. The animals are acting strange, not just the tagged ones. Every animal in the park seems to be responding to some kind of residual signal." Through the darkness, Rachel could see Linda Peterson frantically directing the tactical teams. "Find those intruders. The new system must go online tonight. We have a schedule to maintain." "West side clear," Ethan whispered into his radio. "But they're setting up some kind of containment parameter. Those aren't just security forces, they're professional wildlife control specialists." Rachel's mind raced. Why would they need wildlife control specialists for an operation that already controlled the animals? Unless they're not just upgrading the system, she realized. They're expanding it. As if confirming her suspicions, a series of high-pitched tones emanated from the new equipment being installed. Even through the chaos, Rachel could see its effect. Every animal in the vicinity froze, then began moving with unnatural coordination. "Multiple park rangers responding to unusual wildlife activity across all sectors," Jenny reported. "We've got bears approaching tourist areas, wolf packs moving in formation, and every tagged animal is heading towards specific coordinates." Dr. Chen's voice was tight with concern. "The sanctuary's in chaos. Every animal we've treated is trying to break out. Even Buddy, who's supposed to be sedated, is responding to whatever signal they're broadcasting." Rachel and Ethan had almost reached the perimeter when a spotlight caught movement ahead of them. A group of elk emerged from the trees, moving with mechanical precision. Behind them, a wolf pack followed. showing none of their natural hostility toward prey animals. "They're creating some kind of controlled ecosystem," Ethan breathed. "This isn't about hunting anymore. They're trying to orchestrate nature itself." Linda's voice cut through the darkness. "Begin Phase 3. Release the control frequencies." New equipment hummed to life, emanating signals that made Rachel's head spin. Around them, the coordinated movement of wildlife intensified. It was like watching a choreographed dance of nature, but there was nothing natural about it. "Rachel," Dr. Chen's urgent voice came through, "these signals, they're not just controlling movement patterns, they're altering behavioral instincts. The animals are forming unnatural groupings, ignoring territorial boundaries, breaking every natural law we know." Jenny's voice joined in. "I've got tourists reporting impossible scenes, predator and prey species moving together, nocturnal animals active in daylight, entire herds changing migration patterns." Through the chaos, Rachel spotted something that made her blood run cold. A map left visible on one of the emergency-lit screens. It showed similar operations being set up in national parks across the country. Yellowstone was just the testing ground. "They're building a network," she realized. "Once these systems are in place, they'll be able to control wildlife movement across the entire country." "But why?" Ethan questioned, ducking behind a vehicle as a patrol passed. "What's the end game?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Linda's phone conversation carried clearly through the night air. "Yes, sir. Once the network is established, we can guarantee wildlife appearances anywhere, anytime. Tourism, hunting, population control. We'll have complete mastery over nature itself." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about profit anymore, it was about power. The power to control entire ecosystems, to choreograph nature like a puppet master. As they processed this revelation, a new sound cut through the night. Helicopter rotors approaching. The extraction team was arriving, ready to complete Protocol Zero's final phase. "We need to move," Ethan urged. Once that helicopter lands, but Rachel's attention was caught by something else, a familiar whimper from the direction of the new equipment. There, illuminated by emergency lights, stood Buddy, somehow transported from the sanctuary, his eyes glazed and movements jerky as he responded to the control signals. The little bear that had started this investigation had just become the living proof of its horror. Now they faced an impossible choice: escape with their evidence, or try to save the animal that had led them to the truth. Either way, they had only minutes before the helicopter landed, and Protocol Zero entered its final, irreversible phase. "Jenny, how long until that helicopter lands?" Rachel whispered, her eyes fixed on Buddy's unnaturally rigid form. 3 minutes max. And Rachel, it's not just one helicopter anymore. I'm picking up 3 more approaching from different directions. The compound had transformed into a scene of controlled chaos. Tactical teams moved with military precision, installing the new equipment while others prepared for what looked like a massive evacuation operation. "Dr. Chen," Rachel called through her radio, "how did Buddy get here? He was supposed to be secured at the sanctuary." "That's just it. He was. 1 minute he was sedated in his enclosure. The next he was walking out like he was being summoned. Rachel, whatever signal they're using, it's overriding even heavy sedation." Ethan's voice cut through their conversation. "We've got movement at the tree line. More animals arriving. This isn't random anymore. They're forming some kind of pattern." He was right. Through the emergency lighting, Rachel could see dozens of animals emerging from the darkness, arranging themselves in concentric circles around the new equipment. Bears, wolves, elk, and smaller creatures, all moving with the same mechanical precision. "It's a demonstration," Rachel realized. "They're showing their investors what the new system can do." Linda's voice carried across the compound. "Ladies and gentlemen, please proceed to the observation area. Tonight you'll witness the future of wildlife management." A group of well-dressed individuals emerged from one of the buildings, their expressions a mix of anticipation and awe as they watched the orchestrated display of animal control. "The applications are limitless," Linda continued, her voice proud. "Imagine guaranteed wildlife sightings for tourists, controlled population management, prevention of human-animal conflicts. We're not just changing the game, we're rewriting nature's rules." Rachel's hand tightened around the device containing their evidence. They had proof of everything now, but getting it out seemed increasingly impossible as more security teams took position around the perimeter. "Rachel," Dr. Chen's voice was urgent, "these signals aren't just controlling them, they're changing them. The biological readings I'm getting from the tagged animals, their entire nervous systems are being rewired." Through their earpieces came Jenny's warning. "First helicopter touching down in 90 seconds. Whatever you're going to do, it needs to be now." Rachel watched as Buddy swayed in place, fighting against the artificial commands coursing through his small body. Other animals showed similar signs of distress, natural instincts warring with the imposed control. "The system's not perfect yet," Ethan observed. "Look at their movements. They're struggling against it." He was right. Despite the impressive display, subtle signs of resistance were visible. Some animals twitched irregularly. Others made aborted attempts to break formation. "Dr. Chen," Rachel asked, "what happens if we disrupt the signal?" "Theoretically, the animals should revert to their natural behaviors. But Rachel, with this many predator and prey species in close proximity, it would be chaos," Ethan finished. "Exactly what we need." Linda's voice rose again. "Begin final calibration. Prepare for full system activation." The new equipment hummed louder, its signals visibly affecting the gathered wildlife. Buddy's movements became even more rigid, his eyes glazed with an unnatural sheen. "Jenny," Rachel decided, "can you trigger a feedback loop in their transmission system?" "Yes, but it would fry everything, including the safeguards keeping these animals in formation. You'd have minutes at most before total chaos breaks loose." The sound of helicopter rotors grew louder as the first aircraft approached its landing zone. Time was running out. Rachel looked at Buddy, then at the gathered investors, and finally at the sophisticated equipment that threatened to turn nature itself into a controlled performance. "Do it," she commanded. "Overload their systems. All of them." As Jenny worked to trigger the feedback loop, Rachel and Ethan prepared for their riskiest move yet. They had one chance to get their evidence out, save Buddy, and expose the truth before the entire operation disappeared into the night. The helicopters descended, their searchlights creating a web of illumination over the compound. In moments, their lights would expose every shadow, every hiding place. But in those same moments, nature itself was about to reclaim its wild heart. The night air crackled with tension as sophisticated technology prepared to wage war with natural instinct. And somewhere in between stood Rachel and Ethan, ready to prove that some things should remain forever wild and free. Jenny's signal disruption hit like a thunderclap through the compound's sophisticated electronics. The high-tech equipment sparked and sizzled, its carefully calibrated frequencies dissolving into chaos. The effect on the gathered wildlife was immediate and dramatic. "Systems failing," a technician shouted. "We're losing control of all sectors." Linda Peterson's composed facade cracked as she watched her carefully orchestrated demonstration descend into mayhem. "Get those backup generators online. We can't lose the signal now." But it was too late. The animals began shaking off their artificial compliance, natural instincts flooding back in a wave of awakening. Predator and prey species suddenly became aware of their unnatural proximity. The perfect circles broke apart as elk scattered, and wolves regained their hunting awareness. Everybody inside. Security personnel began herding the shocked investors toward the buildings. The sound of helicopter rotors added to the cacophony as the aircraft wavered uncertainly above the chaos. Rachel seized the moment. "Now, Ethan!" They sprinted toward Buddy, who was still shaking off the effects of the control signal. The small bear's eyes were clearing, natural awareness returning. Around them, other animals fled in all directions, their movements no longer synchronized, but wild and free. "The main control hub is offline," Jenny reported through their earpieces. "They're trying to switch to backup systems, but I'm blocking their access. You've got maybe 5 minutes before they can restore partial control." Dr. Chen's voice joined in. "Rachel, the biological readings are normalizing. Whatever hold they had on the animals' nervous systems is breaking down. But be careful. They'll be disoriented and possibly aggressive as their natural instincts return." Through the chaos, Rachel could hear Linda shouting into her phone, "Sir, we've lost containment. The demonstration, no sir, we don't know how." "Yes sir, I understand the implications." The investors' panic added to the confusion as they fled toward their vehicles. The tactical team struggled to maintain order, caught between protecting their clients and securing their equipment. "Rachel!" Ethan's warning came just in time. A confused and frightened elk charged past them, nearly crushing them against a vehicle. The natural order was reasserting itself with a vengeance. Buddy recognized Rachel as she approached, his artificially induced docility replaced by natural wariness. But something of their connection remained, perhaps memory of the care he'd received at the sanctuary. "Easy, little one," Rachel soothed, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. "Let's get you out of here." A massive explosion of sparks from the main control tower illuminated the scene like artificial lightning. Jenny's voice came through tight with satisfaction. Their entire system just went into terminal overload. Hope they had good insurance. But their success had created a new problem. With the control system destroyed, dozens of formerly captive animals were now loose and disoriented. The compound had become ground zero for nature's rebellion against artificial control. "Rachel," Dr. Chen's urgent voice cut through the chaos. "The biological data shows the animals' stress levels are spiking. Once the adrenaline hits their systems fully..." She didn't need to finish. Already the night air was filling with the sounds of truly wild animals. Not the artificial quiet of controlled behavior, but the full-throated chorus of nature unleashed. Linda's voice rose above the chaos. "Initiate emergency protocol. Contain the assets." "Assets?" Ethan spat the word. "They're still talking about these animals like they're property." Rachel watched as Buddy moved closer to her, drawn not by artificial signals now, but by something more basic: recognition, perhaps trust. Around them, the compound's carefully maintained order had dissolved into primal chaos. The helicopter's searchlights swept the area, creating a disorienting strobe effect as they tried to track the movement of animals and humans below. In the confusion, Rachel spotted something that made her heart race. One of Linda's security teams was deploying what looked like heavy-duty tranquilizer equipment. "They're trying to recapture them," she realized. "They'll start the whole program over somewhere else." Through their earpieces, Jenny's voice carried a new urgency. "Park rangers are responding to the signal's disruption. They'll be here in 10 minutes. But Rachel, I'm picking up chatter. Someone's called in private security contractors. Heavy hitters coming in fast." Time was running out. They had the evidence they needed, but getting it out and ensuring Buddy's safety had just become significantly more complicated. The night's true test was still ahead, and the line between captivity and freedom, between artificial control and natural order, was about to be drawn in ways none of them had anticipated. In the chaos of flashing lights and fleeing animals, Rachel made a swift decision. "Jenny, can you get eyes on those incoming security contractors?" 3 vehicles, heavily equipped, coming in from the North Access Road, 5 minutes out max. "And Rachel?" "They're carrying some serious hardware, not just tranq guns." Ethan appeared at her side, his ranger uniform covered in dirt from their earlier hide-and-seek with the tactical teams. "We need to get this evidence out now." Once those contractors arrive, a series of sharp cracks echoed through the compound as more equipment succumbed to the feedback loop. The sophisticated control system was eating itself alive, sending cascading failures through the entire network. "The biological data is fascinating," Dr. Chen reported through their earpieces. "As the control signals fade, the animals' natural behavioral patterns are reasserting themselves in waves. It's like watching evolution in fast forward." Linda's voice cut through the chaos, directing her remaining security teams. "Secure the perimeter. Don't let any of them escape. The investors need to see we can contain this." But nature had other plans. The formerly docile animals, their instincts fully awakened, were creating the kind of chaos that no security team could contain. Elk bounded over vehicles, wolves slipped through gaps in the perimeter, and smaller animals disappeared into the underbrush. "Rachel," Jenny's urgent voice returned. "Park rangers are 3 minutes out, but those contractors will beat them here. Whatever we're doing, it needs to happen now." Through the mayhem, Rachel watched Buddy. The young bear was fully awake now, his movements showing the natural wariness of a wild animal. But he hadn't fled, maintaining a careful distance while watching her with intelligent eyes. "The sanctuary's ready," Dr. Chen reported. "We've prepared a secure area, completely isolated from any potential control signals." But getting him there, a new sound cut through the night, the deep rumble of approaching vehicles. The contractors were almost here. Time to move, Ethan urged. North side's our best bet. Most of their security is focused on the south, trying to contain the larger animals. Rachel nodded, but she couldn't take her eyes off Buddy. The little bear that had started this whole investigation was still in danger. If the contractors recaptured him, he'd disappear into another facility, subjected to more experiments and control. Dr. Chen, she asked, what are his chances if we just let him go? Honestly, after months of conditioning and control, he needs time to fully recover, to relearn his natural behaviors. In the wild right now, the decision crystallized in Rachel's mind. They couldn't leave him behind, but they also couldn't risk the evidence they'd gathered. Everything they'd discovered, the control systems, the investor lists, the network of facilities, it all had to reach the right authorities. Ethan, take the drive, Rachel decided, handing over their collected evidence. You and Jenny get this to the park superintendent. I'll handle Buddy. Rachel, those contractors will have to go through a federal officer to get to him, she finished. I'm not letting them take him, not again. The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder. Through the trees, they could see the contractors' headlights sweeping the access road. Linda's voice rose again. Prepare for containment. Don't let them reach the main road. But even as she gave the order, more animals broke through the perimeter. The contractors would arrive to find nature itself working against them. The carefully controlled order of their operation shattered by the very forces they'd tried to suppress. Jenny, Rachel called, how much longer can you maintain the signal disruption? Maybe 2 minutes. After that, they might be able to restore partial control. But Rachel, the damage we've done to their system. It'll take weeks to rebuild, even with their resources. 2 minutes. In that time, they needed to get their evidence to safety, secure Buddy's freedom, and ensure that this operation could never be rebuilt. The contractors were almost here. The park rangers were on their way. And somewhere in between, the future of Yellowstone's wildlife hung in the balance. Rachel looked at Buddy, then at the chaos around them. Sometimes she realized the bravest thing wasn't fighting. It was knowing when to let nature take its course. And nature, in all its wild and untamed glory, was about to show these contractors exactly what they were up against. The contractors' vehicles burst into the compound, their high-powered lights cutting through the chaos. Professional teams deployed with military precision, but they found themselves facing a situation no training could have prepared them for. Ma'am, the control systems are completely offline, one of the contractors reported to Linda. We're looking at full wildlife integration, with no containment protocols. Linda's composed facade finally cracked. Just contain them. Use whatever methods necessary. Rachel watched from her position near the tree line as Buddy tensed, his natural instincts clearly warring with months of conditioning. The young bear's eyes darted between her and the forest, freedom and familiarity hanging in perfect balance. Rachel, Jenny's voice came through, urgent but controlled. Park rangers are 1 minute out, but there's something else. I'm picking up local news helicopters approaching. Someone tipped off the media. Through their earpieces, Dr. Chen added her expertise. The biological readings are stabilizing. The animals are returning to their natural patterns, but they're displaying heightened stress responses. This could either trigger flight or fight reactions. The contractors spread out, their equipment revealing their true purpose, not just containment but recapture. These were professionals who specialized in controlling and transporting wildlife, but they'd never faced animals awakening from artificial control. Team 2, deploy the sound barriers, the lead contractor ordered, heard them back toward the containment area. But nature had other plans. The sound equipment, designed to guide wildlife movement, only added to the chaos. Animals responded unpredictably, their natural instincts overwhelming any attempted control. The investors are demanding answers, Linda shouted into her phone. Sir, we can't just... Yes, sir, I understand. Initiating total shutdown. Rachel watched as the remaining staff began destroying equipment, erasing hard drives, and loading crucial components into vehicles. They were cutting their losses, preparing to abandon the operation entirely. Ethan's clear, Jenny reported. Evidence is secure and on its way to the superintendent. But Rachel, you've got about 30 seconds before those contractors reach your position. Buddy moved closer to Rachel, but his movements were different now. No longer the artificial docility of controlled behavior, but the cautious approach of a wild animal choosing to trust. Around them, other animals continued their exodus into the forest, their movements becoming more natural with each passing moment. "Dr. Chen," Rachel whispered, "what are you seeing in the biological data?" "Something remarkable. The animals aren't just breaking free from the control signals, they're actively resisting any new attempts at control. It's like their systems have developed an immunity to the artificial frequencies." The sound of approaching vehicles signaled the arrival of park rangers. Their presence added another layer to the unfolding scene, official authority arriving to witness the aftermath of unauthorized experimentation. Linda's voice rose one last time. "Contain what you can. We need samples, data, anything we can salvage." But her words were drowned out by a new sound, the deep resonant call of a mother, bear somewhere in the darkness. Buddy's head snapped up, natural instinct overwhelming months of artificial conditioning. Rachel made her decision. Not with words or actions, but with stillness. The simple act of stepping aside, creating a path between Buddy and the forest. Sometimes, she realized, the greatest service to nature was knowing when to let go. The contractors were closing in, their equipment ready to recapture any wildlife they could reach. But they hadn't counted on the power of natural bonds, of instincts deeper than any artificial control. As the mother bear's call echoed again, Buddy's transformation became complete. The last traces of artificial control melted away, replaced by the ancient wisdom of his species. With one last look at Rachel, a look that held recognition but no dependence, he made his choice. The night erupted into a final cascade of chaos as nature reclaimed its own. The contractors found themselves facing not just free animals, but truly wild ones, their natural instincts restored and strengthened by their ordeal. In the midst of it all, Rachel stood her ground, watching as Buddy disappeared into the forest, following a call more powerful than any human-made signal. Around her, the sophisticated operation that had sought to control nature crumbled in the face of something far stronger, the unbreakable bonds of the natural world. The arrival of news helicopters transformed the hidden operation into a flood of exposure. Camera lights illuminated the compound like artificial daylight, capturing the chaos of fleeing wildlife and scrambling personnel. Linda Peterson's carefully constructed facade of control had crumbled completely. "This is beyond containment," the lead contractor announced, lowering his equipment. "We're looking at full media exposure. Orders?" Linda stood frozen, watching years of planning dissolve in minutes. The investors had already fled, their expensive vehicles leaving trails of dust as they escaped the unfolding disaster. Above, the whir of helicopter blades mixed with the sounds of nature reasserting itself across the valley. "Rachel," Jenny's voice came through crisp and clear. "You're not going to believe this. The story's already breaking. Someone leaked preliminary footage to every major network. Our Yellowstone Exposed is trending." Through their communications, Dr. Chen added her perspective. The sanctuary's receiving calls from wildlife organizations across the country. Similar operations have been exposed in 3 other national parks. This is becoming systemic. Park rangers had secured the perimeter, their official presence bringing order to the chaos. But it was a different kind of order now, not the artificial control of before, but the lawful protection of natural spaces. "The superintendent's reviewing the evidence," Ethan reported. "Federal authorities are being notified. This goes way beyond local jurisdiction." Rachel watched as Linda was approached by senior park officials, her authority dissolving as quickly as her operation. The woman's perfectly maintained appearance had crumbled, leaving someone who looked lost in the world she'd tried to control. "Agent Martinez," a voice called out, and Rachel turned to see Jenny approaching, her ranger uniform replaced by official federal credentials. "Your cover operation has been invaluable. The Environmental Crimes Division has everything they need." The revelation of Jenny's true identity sparked murmurs among the gathered rangers. She'd played her role perfectly, gathering intelligence while posing as a rookie ranger. The operation had been monitored from the start, waiting for the right moment to expose its full scope. "The biological data is extraordinary," Dr. Chen continued through their earpieces. "What we've documented here, The control methods, the animal responses, the recovery patterns. It's going to revolutionize wildlife protection protocols. We'll be better prepared to prevent anything like this from happening again. In the distance, the sounds of the forest were changing. The artificial quiet of controlled wildlife was being replaced by the natural symphony of free creatures. Even the air felt different, as if nature itself was breathing a sigh of relief. They were recording everything, a technician revealed, as rangers examined the compound's databases. Every experiment, every modification, every response. They were building a blueprint for controlling entire ecosystems. But nature had written its own story tonight. The animals they'd tried to control had broken free, not just physically, but fundamentally, their natural instincts strengthened by the very attempts to suppress them. "We've got movement in Sector 7, a ranger reported. But his tone was different now, not the urgent alert of before, but the practiced observation of someone used to working with wildlife on its own terms. Through her binoculars, Rachel spotted what had caught his attention. A mother bear and her cub, Buddy, moving naturally through the forest, their movements no longer constrained by artificial signals. They were heading deeper into the park, away from human interference, following paths that had existed long before anyone tried to control them. The morning sun was beginning to paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, nature's own light show replacing the harsh artificial glare of the compound. Linda and her remaining staff were being processed by federal agents, their dreams of controlling nature replaced by the reality of accounting for their actions. "The Park Service is already implementing new protection protocols," Jenny announced, reviewing updates on her phone. "What happened here is going to change how we approach wildlife management across the entire system." Rachel watched as the last of the control equipment was documented and secured as evidence. The sophisticated technology that had promised mastery over nature now seemed strangely small and inadequate in the face of wild freedom. In the growing light of dawn, Yellowstone was awakening to a new day, one where its wild heart would continue to beat to its own rhythm, uncontrolled and uncontained. The story of attempted control had transformed into a testament to the enduring power of natural freedom. The weeks following the exposure of Yellow Adventures Tour's operation brought changes that rippled through Yellowstone like waves across a pond. The park had become a symbol of nature's resilience, drawing researchers, environmentalists, and media from across the globe. Rachel sat in her office, reviewing the final reports. The evidence they'd gathered had led to investigations in national parks across the country. Similar operations had been discovered and shut down, their sophisticated control systems dismantled before they could fully activate. "The sanctuary's latest scans are remarkable," Dr. Chen shared during their morning briefing. "The animals' neural patterns show complete recovery. Whatever changes the control signals caused, their natural instincts have fully reasserted themselves." Through her window, Rachel could see tourists gathering for the morning wildlife tours. But these were different now, guided by trained naturalists who taught respect for wild spaces rather than promising guaranteed encounters. "The park's new guidelines are being implemented nationwide," Jenny, now officially Agent Martinez, explained. "Your experience here has helped shape protection protocols that will safeguard wildlife for generations." Ethan entered the office, carrying fresh satellite imagery. "You're going to want to see this," he said, spreading the photos across Rachel's desk. They showed wildlife movement patterns across the park, but these were natural migrations, unfettered by human interference. "The bears are following traditional routes again," he pointed out. "All the artificial patterns have disappeared. Nature found its own way back." The investigation had revealed the full scope of Linda Peterson's operation. Corporate investors had poured millions into the development of wildlife control technology, seeing it as the future of tourism and resource management. Instead, they'd learned a costly lesson about the power of natural systems. "The biological data we gathered is revolutionary," Dr. Chen continued, "but not in the way they intended. We now understand better than ever why these animals need to remain wild, how their natural behaviors maintain the delicate balance of entire ecosystems." Rachel's phone buzzed with a message from the sanctuary. They'd been tracking several of the formerly controlled animals, monitoring their recovery. The latest updates included footage that made her smile. Buddy and his mother, caught on trail cameras high in the mountain valleys, behaving exactly as wild bears should. The tourist feedback has been surprising, Ethan noted, reviewing the latest surveys. People are more satisfied with authentic wildlife experiences, even if they're less predictable. They're learning to appreciate nature on its own terms. The park itself seemed to be healing. Without the artificial control signals affecting animal behavior, natural patterns had re-emerged. Predator and prey species maintained their ancient dance, migration routes followed seasonal rhythms, and the complex web of life continued its eternal cycle. We've had requests from conservation groups worldwide, Jenny added. They want to understand how we detected and stopped the control operation. Your experience here is becoming a blueprint for protecting wild spaces everywhere. Rachel stood by her window, watching a herd of elk move naturally through the valley below. Their movements were no longer the rigid patterns of controlled behavior, but the fluid grace of truly wild creatures. The investigation had changed more than just park policies. It had transformed how people viewed their relationship with nature. The failed attempt to control wildlife had become a powerful reminder of why some things needed to remain wild and free. The new training programs start next week, Ethan mentioned. Rangers from parks across the country coming to learn how to spot signs of artificial wildlife control. Your experience is becoming required teaching material. As the morning sun climbed higher, Rachel thought about how close they'd come to losing something precious, not just individual animals, but the very essence of wildness itself. The sophisticated technology that had promised to make nature predictable had instead revealed why unpredictability was essential to life itself. Through her binoculars, she spotted movement on a distant ridge. A bear and cub, moving with the natural grace of truly wild creatures, reminded her that some victories weren't about winning control, but about letting go of the need to control in the first place. The park would continue to face challenges, but its wild heart would beat stronger for having survived this threat. In the end, nature had proven more resilient than any artificial system designed to control it. And in that resilience lay a lesson that would echo through generations to come. 1 year after the Yellow Adventures Tours incident, Rachel stood at the same overlook where their investigation had begun. The morning air was crisp with autumn's approach, carrying the natural sounds of a thriving ecosystem. The final reports are in, Jenny announced, joining her at the railing. The technology they developed has been completely dismantled. Every national park now has systems in place to detect any similar attempts at wildlife control. Below them, a tour group listened attentively as Ethan explained the park's new wildlife observation guidelines. The visitors seemed engaged, understanding that unpredictability was part of nature's beauty. Dr. Chen's research has been groundbreaking, Rachel noted, reviewing the latest scientific journal on her tablet. The sanctuary's documentation of the animal's recovery had led to new understandings about wildlife behavior and conservation. The park had transformed in subtle but significant ways. Instead of promoting guaranteed wildlife sightings, educational programs now focused on teaching visitors about natural behaviors and the importance of preserving wild spaces. Remember this? Jenny handed Rachel a familiar file. Inside was the picture of Buddy from their first encounter, the injured cub that had led them to uncover a nationwide conspiracy. Recent trail camera footage showed a vastly different animal. Buddy had grown into a healthy young bear, fully integrated into his natural habitat. His story had become a symbol of resilience, featured in documentaries and conservation programs worldwide. The park superintendent's implementing your recommendations. Ethan joined them, his ranger uniform sporting new environmental protection insignia. Every ranger is now trained to recognize signs of wildlife interference. What happened here changed everything. Dr. Chen's voice came through on their shared channel. You should see the latest sanctuary data. The animal's natural behavior patterns have fully stabilized. Even better, we're seeing traditional migration routes being used that haven't been active in decades. Tourism had evolved too. Visitors now came to Yellowstone not expecting guaranteed encounters, but hoping to glimpse authentic moments of wild beauty. The park's popularity had actually increased, drawn by its commitment to preserving genuine wilderness. The educational impact has been remarkable, Jenny observed, watching another group of students arrive for their wilderness awareness program. People are learning to respect nature's autonomy rather than trying to control it. Rachel's phone buzzed with an alert from one of the new monitoring stations. The message brought a smile to her face. Trail cameras had captured footage of Buddy and his mother leading a group of younger bears, teaching them the ancient ways of survival in the wild. It's like the park itself is teaching us, Ethan reflected, watching the scene below. The more we try to control nature, the more we realize why it needs to stay wild. The morning sun illuminated the valley, highlighting the natural movement of wildlife across the landscape. No artificial patterns, no controlled behaviors, just the pure, unpredictable dance of life in one of Earth's last wild spaces. We've had inquiries from international conservation groups, Jenny mentioned. They want to implement similar protection protocols in wild spaces around the world. What happened here is creating ripples everywhere. As they watched, a family of elk moved naturally through the valley, their movements fluid and free. Nearby, a wolf pack followed its ancient hunting patterns, maintaining the delicate balance that had existed for millennia. The legacy of their investigation had extended far beyond exposing a single operation. It had sparked a global conversation about the relationship between humans and wildlife, leading to stronger protections for wild spaces everywhere. "This is how it should be," Rachel said softly, watching the sunrise paint the landscape in shades of gold. Not controlled, not predicted, just wild. The park continued its eternal rhythm, its wild heart beating stronger for having survived the attempt to control it. And in that wildness lay a lesson that would echo through generations. Some things were meant to remain free, unpredictable, and wonderfully, perfectly wild. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Rachel, Ethan, and Buddy has touched your hearts and reminded you of nature's precious freedom. We've prepared a special playlist featuring more inspiring tales of wildlife conservation and human courage. Find it by clicking the link to your left. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the delicate balance between humans and nature. Join us in celebrating and protecting our world's wild spaces. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how this story resonated with you. Until our next adventure, stay wild and free.